All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started on the day. We've got part 2 of chapter 7, our second part on photosynthesis. Next class we'll have a quiz over this chapter and we'll do a review for the second lecture exam. Next week your homework's due and we'll take the exam itself. Please come to my office hours. They're there for a reason. They're there to help you. Why couldn't you attend? All right, chapter 7, part 2. In the last lecture, we covered the light gray learning objectives. And today we're going to cover the ones that are black. Okay, so we've got quite a bit to get through. But we can start once again with our image, our beautiful artwork from David Goodsell. That's also scientifically accurate, as I've said 1,000 times. We have a slice through a chloroplast, and when we started last lecture, we didn't necessarily understand what was going on in this image, but we can now appreciate that the slice through the chloroplast throws us these stacks of membranes that we call the thylakoids. Okay? We see the stroma is filled, chock full of molecules in blue around our green thylakoids. Okay? Today we're going to ascribe some additional meaning to this, specifically with respect to the cutaway up here on the top right. We're going to see a couple of these players in today's lecture, namely photosystem 2 and photosystem 1. We're also going to see a bunch of electron transport molecules with some fun names that you don't need to know for this exam or this class. But we're going to also discuss ATP synthase, okay, the generation of ATP from sunlight and a few other things in the light reactions of photosynthesis. We'll follow that up with the Calvin cycle and finish the chapter. Photosynthesis powers life. Everything on the planet requires energy, and in almost every ecosystem that we know of, most of that energy is coming from the conversion of sunlight into chemical, usable fuel. In photosynthesis, the energy in sunlight is used to rearrange the atoms of carbon dioxide and water to form organic fuel. Most of the time that organic fuel means glucose, okay, the simple monosaccharide sugar that we've talked about a number of times. Okay. Photosynthesis is also going to release molecular oxygen, right? This is all stuff you know. It's all stuff we covered in our overview of photosynthesis last time. But remember, we're taking sunlight, we're taking the energy in sunlight, we're rearranging the atoms of a few compounds to store that energy into a sugar molecule that's brimming with potential energy. And when we harken back to chapter 6 in cellular respiration that we discussed many moons ago, we understand that glucose is chock full of potential energy, right? That energy got there as a result of a photosynthetic process. Plants, algae, some photosynthetic protozoans, and some photosynthetic bacteria, which we call cyanobacteria, are primary photosynthesizers on the planet. Okay, we collectively refer to this group as the photoautotrophs, photo for sunlight, and the autotroph portion refers to the fact that photoautotrophs and autotrophs themselves are capable of feeding themselves. They're capable of making their own energy. Okay? We typically like to think of the autotrophs as our producers in an ecosystem. Okay? And the producers are often consumed by the consumers, who are usually heterotrophs. Heterotrophs are organisms that cannot synthesize their own organic fuels. Autotroph, self-feeder, heterotroph must eat the autotroph in order to survive. Okay, that's our general rule for heterotrophs. All right, they are 100% dependent upon autotrophs for survival. That's one of the primary reasons why photosynthesis is relevant to everyday life. That's because we as human beings are heterotrophs, and we must consume plants or consume things that consumed plants in order to derive chemical energy. Okay? That's one reason. Can anyone think of another reason that photosynthesis is relevant to humans? Take a moment, think about the question. It's up here if you need it repeated, and then I'll poll you all or take a volunteer. If you're sitting there stumped, think about the products of photosynthesis and how that might relate to you as a human being. All right, does anyone care to take a guess or think they know the answer or the one I'm looking for at least? Yeah, absolutely. I was looking for oxygen, right? Glucose is one of the primary products of photosynthesis, but so is molecular oxygen, O2, the thing that we breathe in order to survive. Moving on to a slide we saw last time, putting a whole lot more information on it. This time we've got our summary equation for photosynthesis to help us navigate where inputs and outputs are coming from and where they're headed. We're going to discuss the light reactions, the first stage of photosynthesis, and we're going to follow that up with the Calvin cycle, the second major stage of photosynthesis. All right, in the light reactions, we're going to have water as an input. We're going to have light as an input. Those are up here and here in our summary equation. We're going to have O2 as a primary output, and we can see that up here as well. But our summary equation doesn't include every single thing that occurs as an input in photosynthesis because we have two more things that are relevant for the light reactions. We have an electron carrier, NADP+, and if that sounds familiar, it is familiar. We discussed NAD+ in cellular respiration as one of our electron carriers, and in this case, we've added a P to the equation. That P stands for phosphorus, but I like to think about this electron carrier and the P associated with it as P for photosynthesis. That helps me keep NAD+ from NADP+. And which processes are involved? Okay. We're also going to have ADP, adenosine diphosphate, and this little circle with a P in it is a phosphate. Okay, we're going to throw those through the light reactions of photosynthesis, and from that we're going to generate some molecules of adenosine triphosphate, ATP, that thing we've talked about at length, so much so that you're probably tired of hearing me say it. We're going to generate some ATP, and we're also going to give some electrons to NADP+ to convert it into NADPH. We'll come back to this when we discuss the Calvin cycle and what those things are doing, but for the time being, my checkpoint question for y'all is, what type of redox reaction describes the conversion of NADP+ into NADPH that has electrons? Take a moment, think about it. And if you're sitting there wondering what the answer might be, your hint for this question is, think about your mnemonic. Leo the lion says, grr, you'll never forget what's happening in oxidation reduction reaction. So, is NADP+ reduced or oxidized into NADPH? Who thinks they know the answer? Awesome, yes. The GR portion of Leo the Lion says GR is for gain of electrons signifying reduction. So NADP+ is reduced into NADPH. It's gained electrons in the process, and that's a reduction reaction. All right. As I said before, that NADPH with its electrons and its ATP are headed for the Calvin cycle. We'll get there. But in the meantime, we've officially arrived at the third way that cells generate ATP. Okay, the third mechanism for ATP generation. We have one more hurdle to jump over before we get there, which is a refresher of the previous two that we discussed in chapter 6 when we discussed that wonderful process of cellular respiration. What is this type of phosphorylation called? Your hint is directly on the slide for you. Anyone know the answer? Yeah, great. If you keyed in on the word substrate here containing the phosphate group that's transferred to ADP to make ATP, you hit the nail on the head. This is absolutely substrate level phosphorylation. What was the other type of phosphorylation we discussed? Yeah, absolutely. It's oxidative phosphorylation, that super efficient way to generate ATP that requires an electron transport chain, the enzyme ATP synthase, and a membrane to establish an electrochemical gradient. Okay. Oxidative phosphorylation is super efficient. And today we get to discuss the third way cells generate ATP, and that's via photophosphorylation, which in essence is an overview of the light reactions of photosynthesis. Okay? We're going to generate ATP through a series of sunlight-driven chemical reactions. We're going to take electrons from water, and we're going to give them to an electron carrier at the end of photophosphorylation. And in the process, we're going to establish an electrochemical gradient of hydrogen ions, much like what we did up here in oxidative phosphorylation. We're going to let those hydrogen ions move back through our ATP synthase enzyme and generate ATP. Super efficient ATP generation as well. Driven by sunlight and electrons. Okay. I'm going to turn you all loose for approximately 9 minutes on the second part of our drawing activity. All the way back in chapter 6, we took out a sheet of blank paper and we split it in half, and you drew oxidative phosphorylation in your own hand. And what I want you to do is grab that sheet, which I previously asked you to bring in. If you forgot yours, we'll have to get you another sheet. You'll write your drawing on the bottom. Find your group mates that you were with many moons ago. Grab your drawing, and under your oxidative phosphorylation, I want you to start drawing photophosphorylation in that process. And my tip for y'all is to try to use the same style that you used for your previous drawing, because one of the primary reasons we're doing this, in addition to the fact that drawing is so useful for engaging different parts of your brain, is we're going to directly compare and contrast oxidative phosphorylation and photophosphorylation. When you have them on the same page in actual space, you can more easily compare the two. Here's the learning objectives that we're focused on for this activity. And as I turn you all loose to get into your groups, I'm going to circulate around the room for about 9 minutes so I can get to each of your groups and provide hands-on focused instruction for this process. It's perfectly fine to start this out a little confused because we haven't at length discussed photophosphorylation yet. But get in your groups, grab your drawings. I've got the textbook up here if you want to use it. I've also got my laptop available to you if you'd like to access the internet on a larger screen than your phone.